The thing that I do that I think is different than the way a lot of lawyers approach the content on their YouTube channels, and the one reason I do have almost 127,000 subscribers is because I'm just myself, right?
Starting or growing your business is hard work. But now you are listening to the Better Business Podcast with me, Steve Cook, and I'm going to try and make it a little easier on you. We on this podcast help you grow a better business with real advice from professionals, and today is no different. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Better Business Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Cook, and today my guest name is Jim Hart. Jim is a lawyer, a YouTuber, and an entrepreneur. He is the founding attorney at Hawthorn Law, where he helps online businesses such as coaches, course creators, and online service providers to get their businesses legally legit. In addition, Jim is the founder of the OB Foundation's membership community, a one-of-a-kind program where he helps his members to build, grow, and protect their online businesses. Jim is also a husband and father to 3 kids, 2 dogs, 2 cats, 3 goldfish, most importantly, and 1 turtle named Fred. And this is a little spoiler alert, but Jim gave me the A-OK to announce that he is starting his own podcast later this month, called the Legal Jim Podcast, where he'll be sharing business and legal tips to help listeners build, grow, and protect their online businesses. Jim, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. As far as to boil everything down to one question, I think we should probably start with, how do you protect an online business?
Well, that's just that's a whole can of worms. There's so many ways to protect it. What I teach people is what I call the lock it down system, which starts with your legal foundation, making sure you have your legal foundation in order. That usually is going to involve something like setting up an LLC properly and doing all those foundational things that you need to do to make sure your business is protected, taking inventory of where you're at and those sort of things. And then the O stands for online presence. We want to make sure your online presence is protected, have the appropriate contracts on your website and privacy policies and things of that sort. The C is for your contracts. You need to make sure that if you're selling anything online, you're going to have a contract that's going to deal with that. If you're a one-to-one service provider, you have a contract for that. And any other if you're hiring independent contractors, you'd have a contract for that. There's all sorts of things that you might need contracts for. So you need to make sure that you have contracts in place. And then the last one is keeping your intellectual property safe, which means making sure to understand what your intellectual property is and, when appropriate, registering that intellectual property with either through the Copyright Office or through the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, and just making sure you get all those things legit. So in a nutshell, that's the kind of the system that I teach to my students and members in my community, and the things that I talk about on my YouTube channel.
And do you, as far as your day-to-day, you're mostly trying to prepare people to stay out of a court, right? You're not actually representing most people. Is that correct or no?
No, yeah, that's correct. I don't do any litigation. I don't represent anybody in court. I do mostly, just kind of general consulting type of work when I do work with one-to-one clients. But my focus right now is primarily on my membership and serving those students that come through and need help building and protecting their online business.
So your YouTube channel, I'm sure that it has to be some significant form of lead generation for you. It boasts over 100,000 followers. And if you're watching the video version of this, you see Jim's got a plaque up on his wall behind him from that channel, I would imagine. Jim, is there, I hear a lot of people, especially like in finances and stuff like that, accountants, is there quite a bit of like legal ramifications about giving like generic advice online, or like, do you have to be kind of careful of that? Or is that something you think about?
Oh, absolutely. It's something you have to be careful about. And that's something that I do. I have disclaimers on all my videos, and I'm always careful to tell people when they're on membership calls with me or whenever I go live on YouTube or Facebook that, whatever I'm talking about here, this is not legal advice. This is just information. This is just information I'm sharing with you. And I guess I'll just do the disclaimer now for anyone who's listening to this podcast. This is just general information. If you have specific questions about your specific situation, then you need to hire a lawyer or a tax professional or a financial advisor or whoever else that you might need to help you with that situation. And so I tell everybody that I don't think there's a huge concern as long as I'm giving people that information and not providing legal advice through any of my online platforms. And I don't provide legal advice through any of my online platforms. So there is no attorney-client relationship. And so, presumably I'd be okay there.
And give a little bit of the kind of overall theme of obviously you're addressing legal questions when it comes to businesses, but give kind of the overall theme of the video content that you provide on there.
The theme of the video content. So, I'm teaching people, what they need, the same things I just talked about previously. We're talking about the legal foundation, the online protections, the contracts, the trademarks, the things like that. And just giving people an overall view of what the issues are that they need to be aware of. And that's kind of what I talk about on my channel. And the thing that I do that I think is different than the way a lot of lawyers approach the content on their YouTube channels, and the one reason I do have almost 127,000 subscribers is because I'm just myself, right? I'm just a guy talking to somebody else on the other side of the screen who, needs some help with these type of things. And I'm not talking down to them. I'm not trying to tell people they need to do this, or this, or the world's gonna,
it's almost like a coffee shop conversation or something. It's kind of
exactly
down to
right.
earth. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes I have my coffee, as I do right now. And if something happens, if like the lighting is bad or the camera goes off or the battery dies on the thing, I make that part of the video. And I think people, enjoy the comic humor in it as well. I don't take myself so seriously to think that just because I'm a lawyer means I'm any different than you or anybody else. I put my shoes on in the morning every day, just like everyone else in the world, and have the same trials and tribulations that everyone else does. And so I just try and be myself.
Sure. So through that avenue and through obviously your business, I would imagine that you get a lot of the same questions, or you see a lot of the same things over and over that you're like, oh, please don't do this. What is something that every small business or online business should either stop doing right now or start doing right now?
Well, I talk about LLCs a lot. It's funny.
That was like your top, I was looking at your top viewed videos. It's like 15 out of the top 50 or something like that.
Well, the issue there is when you try and talk about things, when you try and get out of your lane on YouTube, YouTube doesn't always like that so well. So when I say I talk about trademarks, and I do, and I've got a number of videos on my channel about trademarks. The problem is they don't get seen as much as the videos when I talk about LLCs. So, I'm not stupid, right? So I talk about the things that I know YouTube is going to show to more people. And so I experiment with things every 4 or 5 videos. I'll throw another topic out there and talk about like personal finance or trademarks or something else. And sometimes the videos do well and sometimes they don't. And if they don't, I just go back to, I talk more about LLCs. But, but your question was, what do people do? What are some things they're doing well? And what are some things they're not doing so well? Was that the question?
Yeah, exactly. What's something you can think of?
So I would say the things that people are doing well is they're aware that there's legal issues that they're going to need to tackle and handle. Like that's good. Like, I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to see that people know that there's things that they need to handle. The problem, the downside, the flip side to that is that they think that they can do it on their own. And I'm not saying they can't do it on their own. There are some people that can, but there's some people that can't. And it really depends on the individual person. And I'm not the one to say, who can and can't do this. There's some people who, they watch a couple YouTube videos and they go to set up their LLC and they do it completely fine. And there's other people where it's a complete disaster. And it depends on so many different things. It depends on the level of, how how technologically savvy and how well the person that's doing it follows directions. It depends on what state they live in. Some states are just easier than other states to form an LLC, and we can't compare all of them like they're in a vacuum. They're not all the same. And I have a list of I have a course also that I don't promote it very much, but it's an LLC startup course. And in there, I went through all 50 states and looked up the requirements for all 50 states and included that in that course. And so I've got a list going through all those requirements. I realize there's probably 6 or 7 states that are really hard to set up LLCs in, and you probably should go to a professional for that. So I think to answer your question, really, it comes down to, the good thing is people are aware that they need legal help. The bad thing is they don't understand sometimes where to draw the line between free advice that they find on YouTube or Google or wherever else, where they can just follow that versus seeking out, a professional. And I'll give you a good example of that. Like I do consults quite a bit. People can schedule strategy calls with me if they'd like, and we talk about their business. We talk about legal stuff. We talk about all sorts of different things during those strategy calls. But I've had people get on those strategy calls with me, and I find out that they're making, several $100,000s a year in their business, and they're still an LLC and they haven't elected an S corp tax status, which is costing them literally tens of thousands of dollars a year in extra taxes they're paying. And so it's just little things like that I hear people doing things like that. And it's like, well, just, sometimes it makes sense to go seek out the help of a professional. You don't have to do it all yourself.
And I noticed a lot of your videos. I feel like there's a blurred line somewhere between the advice that, not a blurred line in a negative connotation. I'm just saying it seems like a lot of your, the stuff you talk about is in between an accountant and kind of in between a legal issue. Do you deal with kind of, let's say like an S corp? I mean, that's also a situation with like accounting and stuff like that. Does that stuff, do you get into that a little bit?
So that's an interesting question. And I think that my answer to that would be, I know enough to be kind of dangerous, but I don't presume to be a tax accountant. I tell people I'm not a tax accountant. If things start to get really tricky with, like, I know, and I've been up until about a year or two, I was filing my own tax returns every year. Then they got too complicated, and now I don't do that anymore. Sure. So it's the same thing with me. Like, you have to know when enough is enough. And so I know enough to understand the intricacies that go along with an S corporation and where it's beneficial and why it's beneficial. But when you start talking about that in conjunction with, self-employed SEP IRAs versus solo 401ks versus other things that you need to do in the business that might save you some taxes or tax write-offs or writing off a car versus, I don't get into that stuff because again, I know enough to know that there's an issue, that these are things you can't do, but I would never, if somebody called me and said, Jim, I want to hire you as a tax attorney to help me with this, the answer would be 100 times out of 100, no, because that's not my role. Right. And so, yes, there's a lot of great tax attorneys out there, and there's a lot of great people on YouTube that's what they talk about quite a bit. For me, again, I stay in my lane. LLCs, just like the YouTube videos, contracts. Huh? Yeah, I stay in my lane. Occasionally, I'll talk a little bit about an S corp because I know it's beneficial. And if you're making over $50,000 a year in your business as net profit, you probably should be an S corp. But you probably also should be consulting with an accountant to make sure that's the right choice and to have them help you with their tax returns.
Gotcha. So, in your experience, and obviously this is just a gut feeling, but when you do these calls or when people are reaching out to you to hire you for, either setting up their business or changing something in the business that they already have going, do you see that most people reach out to you before they have legal issues or kind of after they've had a little bump on the knee as far as they had a little scare with the legal issue or something like that?
I've had both, but I would say, predominantly it's people that reach out to me before they have legal issues. You have to understand that the people that I think I attract predominantly to my YouTube channel are people that are just getting started and they're trying to learn and they want to follow the rules and they want to do things correctly and they want to make sure they set it all up the right way. And so they do typically reach out to me and to try and figure out what they need to be doing before they're actually doing it, which goes back to what I said at the beginning of the show, which is I see a lot of people who use legal as this crutch where it's like, okay, well, I have to do this, 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 and this before I start my business. Well, yes, that might be true, but at the same time, sometimes you just gotta, get off the couch and start working on your business and put some offers out there and try and get some clients and some customers. And you can't let legal be, a huge crutch. So, I would say I see more of the people who are coming to me because they want to start a business and they want to make sure they do it the right way.
Does the however you want to say it, the legal system, I was going to say the government, but I guess the legal system would be a better way to put it. Does the legal system seem like it's kind of behind when it comes to the niche that you kind of are in with online businesses and things like that? Does it seem like the legal system is a little bit trailing that industry, that it's not caught up to it, or do you just treat it like kind of like every other business?
I think that's it's interesting. I think that there's a lot. So when you're talking about like online business, you have to understand that even though online business is huge right now, and it's gotten even bigger over the past 15 months because of COVID, and a lot of people working from home and trying to find other ways to make money online and do things like that, there's still a very large portion of the population who thinks that this online business stuff is just kind of, what do you do? Like I go home and talk to my family and they're like, wait, you've got a YouTube channel and that makes money. How does that work? Like they don't get it. And that's fine that they don't get it. But there's a lot of people in this country who that's the mindset.
It's a hobby type of deal.
Yeah, it's a hobby. They don't really understand, or they figure you're trying to scam somebody or who knows what they're thinking. But that being said, there's also a lot of people in state legislatures who, if you think about it, in a lot of the state legislatures, we're talking about, maybe an older demographic, and who just people that didn't grow up with the internet who are elected to office, who don't necessarily understand the thing. So yeah, if you would say that if you want to call it the government or the legal system is behind, yeah, they probably are to some extent. Because, you just have the people that are making the laws are not really familiar with how it works so much. And, the other thing I'll say about that, where I live here in North Carolina, I mean, the court system itself is behind the times. I mean, there's other places where, you've got online filings and you've got, you can do a lot of stuff online. The court system here is not set up for that. And it's just, it's too bad because you could really save a lot of people and taxpayers and the public in general a lot of money if you modernize things. There would be a little bit of a hit initially, but it would be helpful to the general public, I would say, and it'd make access to legal so much easier. But it's not there yet. And so yeah, I would say. And then the other thing I talk about, doing all this research to figure out how these states are doing the LLCs. I mean, some of these websites to set up LLCs, they look like they were built, in the 90s and haven't been updated in 25 years. Yeah, I mean, God, it's ridiculous. And so yeah, I think that there are a lot of ways where, the legal system is somewhat behind, and that they don't really understand this. The other area where I see it a lot is, like with sales tax. Which, isn't necessarily a bad thing that is behind because, because it's, I mean, collecting sales taxes as an online entrepreneur is a difficult thing. Fortunately, there's programs out there that you can use now that make it easier to do that. But still, at the heart of it, you're collecting revenue for the government, which is a pain and nobody wants to do that. But it's also something we have to live with. And at some point, everyone's going to have to deal with that. So there's a lot of ways that the legal system could improve. Is it behind? I think it's always going to be behind because the technology is always going to advance faster than the people that are legislating the laws to try and figure out how to deal with it.
True. What is, if you can think of an incident or a something that happened, what is kind of one of the more memorable things that you have seen, or maybe you actually dealt with, you personally, that was just such a eye opener for you and people getting into legal trouble that they didn't have something set up properly, or maybe they were just being lazy or something like that, or somebody got into serious trouble that you felt was pretty preventable?
I think I kind of, one thing that I think I have seen is I've seen a lot of people mess up their S corporation tax election. I've seen people who were in partnership with people that lived overseas who were not U.S. citizens form S corporations. Well, an S corporation, has to be owned by a U.S. Citizen or resident, and so if somebody tries to form it with somebody who lives overseas who's not a citizen, that's going to be problematic and cost, potentially, penalties and interest and the IRS disallowing that election, because it's going to happen at some point. They're going to figure out that person doesn't have a tax ID number. So how can they own the S corp? So there's issues like that I've seen that can be problematic. And I've seen people who have had issues with their brands because they haven't registered their trademarks, or they've started using a name that they think is okay, and then we do a trademark search for them and realize that it's not okay. There's so many different ways that people can get in trouble. People that set up an LLC and put the paperwork in a drawer and wipe their hands and say, okay, I set up my LLC, now I'm good. And then they
I got customers to wait on.
They don't change anything else about their business. And so I see all sorts of things. There's a lot going on where people can make mistakes. Yeah, I wouldn't say there's anything really eye-opening. I'm not really surprised by anything now. I'm sorry.
Those just seem incredibly preventable. Like you're saying with the S corp, that takes 5 seconds of homework, or having a legal, person to tell you that, hey, you can't do this. This guy doesn't live in the United States or whatever. Those are very preventable, easily preventable things. What is something that you believe as a lawyer, or maybe you changed your mind on halfway through, or whatever it might be, that almost no one agrees with you about, or other lawyers don't agree with you about?
Other lawyers don't agree with me about that people are not able to do this stuff on their own. I think the legal industry as a whole wants to believe that you have to have a lawyer to do these things. I don't think that's the case anymore. Now, again, going back to what I said before, there are people that can do it and there are people that can't. And then there's also people that think they can, who really shouldn't. So you have to know, you have to know what your limitations are and what you're capable of. But I think that there's probably a lot of lawyers, but I also talk to a lot of progressive lawyers who look at what I'm doing and are like, that's amazing. This is great. Like, I wish I could do that, but I'm still stuck in this law firm, and so it's interesting, but yeah, I think people need to understand they can do a lot on their own, but sometimes they need some good help and guidance along the way too. And I've tried to bridge that gap with my membership community, where I kind of teach people like kind of how to do the things that they need to do. But again, it's enough just to make, to give people the information. And ultimately at the end of the day, I'm not their lawyer. I'm just somebody who is teaching them about the system and how it works and what the rules are. And they need to figure out whether or not they need to help. They need to hire their own help for their situation.
And on your YouTube channel, did you, obviously I'm sure it's a little bit of both, but do you use it, strictly as a lead generator for more business for yourself, or do you have like this, attitude of I want to help people that want to do it themselves for good, to put some good out in the world?
Well, lead generator, that's kind of a loaded term. I would say when I first started, I had no aspirations for the channel. Like I literally, I started it because, honestly, I started it back in 2015, I think, end of 2015, beginning of 2016. And around that time, my mother had terminal cancer, and she ended up passing away in 2016. And I went through a funk just personally for probably about a year after that, where I honestly was putting videos out because I didn't know what else to do. I just was so, I was like, well, this is something I can do. It gives me some space. It's fun. I can talk about things that I like talking about, and maybe somebody will watch them. And and then I stopped doing them, and I didn't even pay attention to the channel for like 2.5 years. And I came back and I had like 10,000 subscribers, and I was like, maybe there's something to this
Get
YouTube
out
thing.
of here. I saw several videos from like 5 years ago. How many videos do you think you put up and then kind of left it alone? Well, I mean, was it like 10 or how many?
I did this. So Amy, used to be Amy Schmidtauer, Amy Landino now, I think, because she got married. She used to have a YouTube channel. She still has it. Now it's Amy TV, but it used to be Savvy Sexy Social. And she did this thing where she was teaching people about YouTube. And so she did a thing called SSS Veda, which was video every day in April, video every day in August. And so I did that. I did it in April of 2016. And I got through like 25 days. I didn't do the whole month, but each day she gives you a prompt. And the whole idea was to get you in the habit of doing videos. Yeah. And that's what I did. I did every day, every morning. I got up, I looked at what her prompt was. I shot a 2 or 3 minute video. I went on, I edited it really quick, and I uploaded it. It took me like an hour or two. And so a lot of those videos are delisted on my channel yet, if you're going to look for them, because they're horrible. But anyway, I got like my first 30 subscribers from that. I remember that. And then, I started doing more videos of what I like to do, and talking about LLCs and things. I did some for a while. For like 15 years, I had a family law practice. And so I did some videos about that. But, I would say, going back to your original question, lead generation versus something else, I would say it's really kind of both. I mean, YouTube is an incredibly powerful platform. I probably would still post videos, even if it wasn't generating leads from my business, but it does generate leads from my business. And so I'm happy about that. It also pays me with affiliate revenue and AdSense revenue and different things like that. And I'm happy about that too. So I think it's I get to give people information for free. And some of those people will come back to me and get on my email list and maybe buy one of my, join my membership or hire my law firm or something like that. And that, that's great. That's the way the whole system is supposed to work. And so I'm happy about that. So is there, what's my goal right now? YouTube is definitely a major factor in the success of my business. But yeah, so I don't take it for granted, but I'm hopeful that I can still provide useful, valuable information to people that are watching the channel. And I try not to sell too much on the channel at all when I do that.
So got one final question for you. And typically I frame up this question that it's a business owner that has become, plateaued in their business or kind of burned out in their business, but might not necessarily apply to this. But the other side of the coin is if you had to give one piece of advice to a new business venture, and I feel like this is really your specialty. And so the question is, if you had to give one piece of advice, boil all of, either this podcast or what in your head to somebody that's starting a new business venture, what piece of advice would that be?
So, I would give a business advice and legal advice. And so let's start with the business advice. My business advice is, if you don't have anyone paying you money, you don't have a business. So you really need to get people paying you as quickly. You laugh,
A
But this,
for-profit
I
business.
see this all the time. Yeah, assuming you're a for-profit business. But even if you're a nonprofit, you need donors, you need
true.
cash, right? So I see this all the time with people that book strategy calls, with people in my membership, and it's like I ask them, I'm like, okay, how much money are you generating right now? I don't have any clients. Well, okay, you need clients, you need customers, you need people buying your stuff, or you don't have a business. So nothing that we talk about from a legal standpoint matters if you don't have anyone paying you money. So that is core premise. You need that. From a legal standpoint, my advice is always, do you have an LLC? If you don't have an LLC, you need to start one as soon as possible. And the reason I say that, now I used to tell people to hold off until they're generating money. I've changed that advice somewhat in the past year or so. And the reason why I've changed that advice is because I think that when you set up that LLC, it triggers a mindset shift in somebody. Oh, okay, now I've got a legitimate business. That takes what you're doing from merely just something that's a hobby that you're doing for fun, that it doesn't matter if you make money or not, to something that's a legitimate business. And now you've invested some money into it, even if it's a couple $100.
Do you think it's almost like a mental deal is why you recommend that?
I think it's a mental deal, but more than that, what happens? So let's say if your business goes nowhere, it doesn't matter. But let's say 6 months from now, you're generating $5,000 a month, $10,000 a month in your online business. But now you've got to set up the LLC. Well, now you've got to switch everything over. Now you're busy running the business that's generating cash flow, and you don't have your LLC set up. And so now you've got to worry about dealing with all those issues, and that you could have just dealt with from the beginning and made it a lot easier on yourself. So that's why I tell people that's the second reason why I think people need to set up their LLC from the start, because even if they're not successful, or even if they're not successful, it doesn't matter. They're out a couple $100. If they are successful, then they've got that foundation in place and they don't have to worry about it later.
Huh. That's really interesting. Well, man, I can't thank you enough for being on. You give unlimited amounts of free content on YouTube, and I wish you all the best in your podcast. I want to thank you for showing so much creativity. I find it kind of inspiring, all the creativity you have in a somewhat staunchy business or a slow to change business. It seems like all the creativity you have in your YouTube videos and things like that. I sure do thank you for all of that. It's inspiring.
Well, thank you very much. And I certainly appreciate you having me on. I would say if anyone's looking to try and reach me or find me, obviously go to the YouTube channel. It's Hawthorn Law is the name of the business. And it's pretty easy to find. If you look up how to form an LLC, you're going to find me. And then don't forget, I'm going to be launching a podcast here, depending on when you're listening to this later.
Hopefully
October,
it'll be launched by the
Gym.
time. Hopefully this will be launched by the time, or your podcast will be launched by the time we get this published, and I can put the link in the bio of the podcast.
Yeah, I'll be sure to share that with you.
That's awesome. Well, man, I know you got to run, but like I said, I do want to thank you again for being on. I did notice, I was going to ask you just kind of after the fact. So do you have two, when you search Jim Hart, it's amazing how many lawyers have the same name as you. So,
yeah.
But anyways, so it could have been somebody else's, but do you have almost like two different deals? Like one's like almost like an e-commerce platform where you can like buy, it's like setting up an LLC or something like that? Or was that somebody else's site? Completely different?
So, I mean, yeah, I have, so no, I have an online template store. We didn't talk about that. Really
that's what
today,
it is.
But
yeah. That's what I had seen.
It's called One Stop Legal. And that's my online template store. We didn't really, we didn't mention that, but so, yeah, I kind of have,
it's almost like a totally separate business, almost, is what I was kind of like seeing. I was like, oh, I bet I didn't know if that was almost kind of where you point your YouTube traffic, but then you had mentioned it's Hawthorn Law and all that. So I was like, well, maybe, I didn't know if maybe that was a different person or something. I forgot to ask you before.
No. Yeah. So I've got my membership community, which is OB Foundations.
Sure.
For online business foundations. I've got Hawthorn Law, which is kind of, my do-it-yourself. We help people with trademarks, LLCs, things of that sort. And then I have a template store called One Stop Legal.
Gotcha.
That is all linked to through all that as well.
So that is yours. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Can I find all your links to all of your, obviously I know where to find the YouTube, but can I find the links to, I'm assuming you have Facebook, Instagram, something like that, or what do you want me to tag in these videos?
I mean, yeah, the podcast will be, I'll make sure to get you a link to the podcast.
As soon as it gets going.
Yeah. As soon as it gets going. I mean, I'm kind of active on Instagram. I do a little bit there. I've got a TikTok channel. But
is it all under Jim Hart or is it Hawthorn Law?
No. And I hired an OBM recently to help me with everything, and she's going to help me get organized, but
that's awesome.
It's most of it is, it's either Hawthorn Law, which is Instagram.
Okay.
And Facebook is Hawthorn Law. TikTok is the Legal Gym.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so, but I just got started with TikTok.
You bet.
It's
Same
still
here.
growing.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that'll be your next, maybe you can take what you learned from YouTube and make it even bigger on TikTok.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know if I can really get into the dancing, but I bet if I did, it would go viral. I'm pretty confident it would.
Now that they have the 3-minute videos, maybe you can actually get some legal advice in a 3-minute, the 60-second video.
I can't give any legal advice on those videos. I can give legal information.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, Jim, thank you so much, man. It was nice getting to know you.
Hey, nice to know you too, Steve. Thanks so much.
Hey, thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Better Business Podcast with me, your host, Steve Cook. Starting or growing a business is hard work, so I hope that today's advice made it just a little bit easier for you. We'll be sharing more about this exact topic all this week on my social platforms. You can find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, or if you would like to get a personalized blog post from me on this topic, you can join my email list and I will send you an email once a week. You can check the show notes to subscribe to that or find me on my website, whatever's easier for you. Now get out there and go grow a better business with this advice from today's Real Pros. Thank you for listening.